Welcome to another edition of the Faithless Warrior. This is Brett, your humble host. Always, you can, if you want to participate in the show, comment on anything being said or discuss anything that you think you would like to share with the show on why you believe what you believe and what's wrong with what I'm saying. 704-931-1036. Leave a voicemail. I'll get back with you. Or you can email the show also at faithlesswarrior777@gmail.com. I know you like the use of those 3 7s in a row, don't you? Anyway, tonight's show is a very necessary show. I didn't plan on doing a show like this so soon, but I had a discussion. I wouldn't say a discussion. I got a response from someone online about the show who didn't listen to any of the show, by the way, but he said to me, kind of based on my username of Faithless Warrior, which is kind of like my nickname, he says, you do have faith in so many things, including that your position is correct. And so basically he was saying that being faithless is a bad thing, and that I'm actually using faith in my position, which is a negative position toward the Bible. That is actually a very incorrect way of looking at the word faith. It's not 100% wrong, but in the way he uses it, in the context of not believing in something, it is absolutely wrong. Which, okay, I'm going to say that kind of is 100% wrong. But anyway, let's talk about one of the biggest problems I've had with discussing the Bible with Christians is, okay, first of all, I run into more Christians who don't really know what the Bible says. That's one big problem. And then the second problem I run into very often is Christians who don't even want to have a discussion about it because they're just going to go back to, well, you just got to have faith. In fact, not too long ago, I was riding down the road and I saw a billboard in front of a church. I mean, it was a giant sign. It was about the size of a billboard, literally. And it had 2 words on it. And those 2 words were, just believe. That's all it said. And I just couldn't help but think, why? Tell me why I'm going to believe something if I don't have solid evidence for it. All right, I'm going to get more into that later. Anyway, if you look up the dictionary definition of the word faith, it's going to say something about having belief, trust, or confidence in something. And that's all fine, but that's not really the way we use the word faith these days. We usually, if we're going to use the word faith in that kind of context, we'll leave the word faith out and we'll use the word belief. So, if you look, also another definition is faith, meaning in the context of religion, belief in the doctrines of a particular religion. And that's kind of correct too, but it's not. Understand that dictionaries don't really define words. Dictionaries are supposed to be reflecting the usage of words. So when we use the word faith, we're not really using the dictionary definition anyway. We're defining it. And typically the way Christians use the word faith, or anybody in any religion, they're saying, we believe something and we really don't care about any evidence. That's why we have faith. That's the whole point of faith, because the evidence is completely unnecessary. When you want to talk about what the Bible says on the subject, the best place to look is Hebrews 11. It says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for. Well, the conviction, depending on the translation, the conviction of things not seen or unseen. Basically, the Bible is saying faith is trusting in something that you cannot prove. And that's actually a very good definition in the way that Christians use it in the context of today. No one really, people don't typically say, well, I have faith that chair is going to hold me up. Because that's not really using the word in the sense that you're believing something without any proof or evidence. Because maybe you've sat in that chair many, many times, or you've sat in many chairs just like it, and you've got every reason to believe that chair will hold you up. So that's not really the kind of faith that you would use, or the correct usage of the word, like we would use it in a more religious or spiritual context. Another way that Christians use the word faith, they'll say faith is believing that what God says is true. Now that's all fine, and I'm okay with that definition as long as God is actually talking to you. But here's where Christians screw up big time. They'll read something in the Bible and go, well, I have faith that that's true because God said it. Well, that's not actually true. It's okay for you to say, I believe God inspired the Bible. And it's okay to say, I believe the Bible. But you can't just come out and say, I believe what God said is true, because you don't know that God said it. You just have faith that the Bible is true. So you're not actually exercising faith in God here. You're actually exercising faith in a book. Now, that's a big difference. Now, you may believe that book came from God, but you need to get your story straight on who you have faith in or what you have faith in. Your faith is actually in the book, and you may believe the book came from God, but it's a mistake to say you're believing that your faith is in what the book says. Now, let's say you were Noah, and God told you to build a boat to save everybody in your family, but it's going to kill everybody else, and you actually started building the boat. Well, in that case, Noah could correctly say he had faith because he's actually hearing it from God, and he's doing what God says because he believed that God is going to do what God says he's going to do, which is drown the whole earth. So that is actually a kind of faith. It's like this. If someone tells you, I'm going to buy you lunch today, and you believe them, well, that's actually showing faith also, because you trust your friend, because your friend just got through telling you. But if you read written down on some note somewhere in a handwriting that you don't recognize that your friend Steve's going to buy you lunch today, well, you're not actually having faith in Steve at that point. You're having potential faith that the note came from Steve. But you don't really know that the note came from Steve. You need to find that out. And there's a big difference between Steve telling you, I'm going to take you to lunch and buy you lunch, and you reading it in a note that you don't even know came from Steve. There is another place in the Bible where the kind of a definition of faith, well, it's basically in Romans 1, around verse 20. It says, it's talking about the writer Paul talking about God. He says, his eternal nature and divine attributes, God is evident in creation. Basically saying that because of what you see around us, God is evident in creation. So, if you say, well, then I just have faith in that because I can see creation, well, that's going to create a problem for you. Because if you're going to say that the earth around us that you're looking at, all the plants, trees, life, everything, if you're going to say that's evidence for God, then that's going to beg the question, which God? Yahweh, Allah, Vishnu, Thor, Zeus, Athena, Odin, Durga, a Hindu god, Mahavira, Brahma, another Hindu god, Shiva, another Hindu god. There's plenty of gods to go around. So if you're going to look at the earth and all the life in it and say, well, that's all the evidence I need for God, you're going to have quite a leap to apply that to the God that you believe in, particularly Jesus Christ. So that remains to be proven. That doesn't mean that that's not what is correct. It just means that the earth and all of its life is not in any way evidence for Jesus Christ. It's evidence that you believe that there's a connection between Jesus and that, or Yahweh and that. But people in other religions around the world are laughing at you. Well, not literally laughing, but they're saying, well, I believe in Mahavira. So therefore, the evidence of Mahavira is so obvious. I mean, look at all the life around us. Just look at the trees, look at the planets, and look at all the universe, and look at us having life. It's very obvious that Mahavira is the God of the universe. I mean, look at us. I mean, it says it in our holy book that the evidence is right here in front of us. It's evident in His creation. So anyone can make the same claim that you can in regard to a very particular life. Faith is basically something that's unconcerned with reason, logic, or evidence. When you say you have faith, it's almost like you're saying, I admit I can't prove this. I admit I have little to no evidence for this, but that's why I have this thing called faith. Sometimes Christians will flip this back at me and say something like, well, do you have... let me back up for a second. If I say I don't have faith in anything, They'll say, well, do you have faith that the sun will rise tomorrow? I say, yeah, I believe that the sun will rise, but it's not based on anything empty. It's based on the fact that it has risen every day since the beginning of recorded time. And so I have actual reason to believe it will rise. Plus, I understand how the planets move and how the sun and how the earth rotates. I have an understanding of that. That is not empty faith. That is not faith at all. That is an incorrect use of the word faith, unless you're going to say, do I have trust and confidence and belief that the sun will rise tomorrow? That's more of a secular definition of faith, but it's not in any way a spiritual definition. It's not a faith that something is just going to happen because of no reason. Matter of fact, if you're going to say that your faith is all you need and you don't need to prove any evidence, what would you say to me if I said, well, I believe that an invisible pink unicorn farted the universe into existence? And you're looking at me like, well, why would you say something so absurd? You don't have any proof whatsoever. Oops, did you say proof? I would say, no, I don't have any proof. I don't even have the slightest bit of evidence that there's an invisible pink unicorn that passed gas and the universe came to be. I don't have the slightest bit of evidence. But that's why I rely on faith. Now, what are you going to say to me on that one? Tell me how it is that your faith is so virtuous and wonderful and accepted and you're so confident in it, but when I have faith in the invisible farting unicorn, you look at me and scoff and laugh and go, that's just ridiculous. And that's exactly what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, that's ridiculous. You're just being stupid, faithless warrior. You're just being ridiculous. You're not making any sense at all when you start talking about invisible farting unicorns. Well, that's exactly the whole point. I am being ridiculous because I have no reason whatsoever to believe in an invisible farting pink unicorn that created the universe and all life in it. You have to ask yourself, when you claim you have faith that your particular God created the universe, how did you come to choose that God over all the many other ones that man has worshipped since the beginning of time? I just named about 10 a while ago. And there's plenty more if I want to name more. Those are just 10 of the most popular ones. And even some of the ones I named, like Zeus, an ancient god, they're actually still worshipped by some people today. And I guarantee if you ask them why, they'd say, well, it's based on faith. I can't prove that the lightning bolts in the sky actually came from Zeus, but I believe they did. And that's exactly what mankind has believed for a long time until science came along and showed us otherwise. But I'm sure there are some Zeus believers who do believe the lightning bolts come from Zeus. I have had numerous Christians to just flat out admit to me that faith is all they have or all they need. And I've got a bit of a problem with that, because when you start saying that faith is all you have, that is an admittance that you don't really have evidence. You don't have anything. You can say all day, I believe the stories of the Bible are true, and I can show you contradictory things in it, but either way, just telling me that you believe something is true and you know that you know that you know, and it's based solely on faith, well, that's as good as nothing to me. It should be as good as nothing to you. It's not showing any form of critical thinking whatsoever. In the religions of today, faith is something that's admired and respected. How many times have you ever heard a religious person say, that Bob, he is something else. He is such a man of faith. And his wife, Amanda, wow, what a woman of faith. Basically what you're actually saying, let me translate that for you. Bob and Amanda are very strong believers in things they cannot prove. Now, how is that virtuous? I want somebody to call this show or contact me, explain to me how it makes you somewhat virtuous to be a super strong believer in something that absolutely cannot be proven beyond any stretch of the imagination. Emphasis on faith is admitting that you have no evidence. The stronger you say your faith is, the less evidence you really actually have. With something like faith, it requires no work to prove that your case is airtight or strong or necessary. In other words, you don't have to prove anything. Let me put this in the context of a court case. Let's say you were accused of a crime that you did not commit, and you're on the stand, and the prosecutor comes up to you and says, I don't really want to ask you any questions or anything related to the case, but here's what I'm going to say to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I don't really have any evidence that this person on the stand is actually guilty, but I just have faith. I just feel it deep down in my heart that they committed this crime. I don't have anything as far as evidence goes, but I just know that I know, and I have faith that this person is the guilty person and the reason that there was an injured party here. Well, how do you think that would go in a court of law? Do you think that prosecuting attorney is going to win this case? They presented no evidence whatsoever, didn't even try to make a case. They just said, I have faith. Well, that's exactly what you're being asked to believe if you believe the Bible blindly with no faith. And it's one thing if you've got some hardcore evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, and we can talk about that on another show, and I will. But if you're going to base anything whatsoever that you believe in a religious context on absolute faith, you have fought a losing battle, and you need to work on your critical thinking skills, because right now you don't have any. Anyway, that's the show for tonight. Oh, one last thing I want to throw at you. If you're going to believe something on faith, tell me what can't you believe on faith. Name me one thing, any scenario whatsoever, I can say I cannot believe on faith. I can say I believe in leprechauns on faith. I can say I believe in the tooth fairy on faith. Name me the limitation. Where does it end if you're going to base it solely on faith alone? Give it some thought. Don't answer to yourself right away. Just give it some thought and ask yourself, in what area of my life do I apply blind, no evidence faith on anything except my religious beliefs? This is the Faithless Warrior signing off. Have a great one.